Thank you very much. So welcome to this meeting of the Wye Catchment Nutrient Management Board. I'm Councillor Alyssa Swinglas, Chair of the Board. I'd like to pass over now to the voice of the Wye. Thank you.
I'd just like us, before we begin to discuss the documents and reports today, to take a moment and remember water, to give thanks to water. I'd like to give thanks to the water that cleanses us and refreshes us each day. I'd like to give thanks to the ocean as our first mother, to give thanks to all the springs and streams and rivers, all the lakes and ponds and pools, to the rain and the snow and the ice. Thank you, waters. We know your power in many forms. Thank you for coming here so long ago and still being here with us, still giving us your gifts, despite what we do to you. Thank you, water.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on with the agenda, we have apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from voting board member Gordon Green, with Stuart Smith in attendance as a substitute for the Wye Salmon Association. Lovely to see you, Stuart. Is anyone aware of any other apologies? Thank you. To receive the notes of the meeting held on the 22nd of October. I think that it's a very good set of notes. Has anyone got any matters of accuracy on these notes, or are you content that I sign them as an accurate record? All content? Thank you. There were some matters arising. There was a question from Tom Tibbetts. The responses have been updated in today's agenda. And likewise, the question from Christine Hugh-Jones, also updated responses in today's agenda. Thank you. So, questions from members of the public for today's meeting. We have a question to the Nutrient Management Board from James Marsden. Welcome, James. Nice to see you here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Charlton.
Oh, yeah. Just a quick, I checked on the question for Tom Tibbetts this morning just to see whether Powys had made a response. From what I understand, it's not terribly clear from the notes that there was some discussion about this, and our response would be the same as it is for Herefordshire. And I believe, but I'm not absolutely sure, that it was agreed that Herefordshire would make that response on behalf of Powys. Having gone through it and read it, it would be exactly the same response as we would give from Powys, but I just wanted to make that clear because it doesn't look as if we've responded.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we've received that. Thank you. So welcome, Pat Sterling. Okay, so the question to the Nutrient Management Board from James Marsden, which hopefully you'll have received, but I'll read out. Whether, and if not, why not, the board will adopt and promote a nutrient and sediment target for the River Wye Lug SSIs and SAC aligned with EIP 25 commitment 26, such as, quote, reduction in total NP and sediment pollution tonnes from agriculture by at least 18% by December 2030 from 2018 baseline. The new Wye Catchment Management Plan should at least align with EIP 25 and arguably should be more ambitious, so a nutrient and sediment target, e.g. as proposed above, could be adopted now without preempting what the Catchment Management Plan may say about the what, where, how and who and by when trajectories to achieve the target. My thoughts about this are that it seems to me only sensible that the Nutrient Management Plan and Catchment Management Plan should align in this degree, so whatever is decided by the one has to be decided by the other, so we probably need to work through that, and also that this is a question might very well come out further in discussions regarding the Nutrient Management Plan and what the scoping of that plan requirements and expectations of that plan are. So if we can kind of hold that in our minds and this question be considered as that progresses, that might be a sensible way forward, if that's acceptable to the board. Has anyone got any further suggestions or thoughts on that? Mary?
Are you saying to answer the question when we get to the discussion about the Welsh
We
Evidence
c-
Base?
yeah, I
and
mean,
the
we can
DWPP?
certainly discuss the sort of the principle of it. I think whether we can commit to exactly what target and is difficult because we don't know what targets we might align with the catchment management plan. But we could, I think, agree a principle that we should align, and that we should align. I think I tend to agree with you, James, that there should be alignment with EIP 25. Otherwise, yeah,
You don't have an option.
exactly.
It's legally binding. I showed Gemma earlier on the 2022 Water Targets regs, which come from the Environment Act 2021. What I've suggested is the interim target, not the long-term target. That's better. So there is no option. There's an option to go further, which is what I'm suggesting the CMP will need to do, which is why I'm suggesting that today, if the NMB has the integrity that I think it has, there should be no faffing. You should just agree to align with a legally binding target now and let the CMP set a more challenging one.
All right, should we do that then? Could we show by hands that all in agreement that the nutrient management plan, as and when it is scoped and designed, needs to at the least accord with the legally binding targets?
With a note that we're aware that it needs to be in excess of 18%. Otherwise, we're looking as if we're saying 18% is okay with us.
Well, we could use it as a minimum position, couldn't we? We say at least.
I think
we
we can't
can't
set
set
to
an
say that we
upper
accept that it's
till we know what
given
we're
the other
aligning
documents, it would need to be more than 18%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, so we're going to move on to discussion of the diffuse water pollution plan from the Environment Agency. I'm going to make the assumption that we've all had this in good time and we have all read it and inwardly digested it, and we don't need a lengthy introduction to it, so that we can move into a discussion and not spend time sort of going over ground that we are already familiar with. I think that sort of seems the most efficient way, given that we have got quite a lot to get through today. Right, so the DWPP, who wants to kick off? Okay, Pat Sterling.
Yep, hi. Yeah, I'm happy to pick up sort of on behalf of both Friends of the River Wye, but also as regards the catchment management plan, which we'll hear more about hopefully. As I'm part of the Task and Finish group, and yet to be formally announced, but hopefully we'll hear more about that as well soon. So, diffuse water pollution plan and the Welsh Evidence Base, which we'll come to in the next item, obviously has a very clear indication of, particularly in the lug, where the shortfalls are. It's very clear as to where the issues are. It makes very clear that the issues are diffuse or agricultural pollution. Makes very clear that's driven by runoff. Virtually entirely, and makes it very clear that there are, in order to tackle the problem, there's a very significant suite of things that would need to be done. What it doesn't then do, and I will contrast that with the Welsh Evidence document, what it doesn't then do is say these are the specific things per sub-catchment that need getting done in order to bridge the gap. It rather says, here are all the things that we would need to do for the lug area to get it back to on target with SAC objectives. But then the document goes on not to recommend to do so, but to recommend a suite of measures which seem to align mostly with the very lowest order of things that are considered in that set of options, i.e. trying to get to regulatory compliance, which gets us next to nowhere. Seeking to get more measures taken up, which gets us not much further. So I'd like to sort of say that for the benefit of the group. Obviously, that's phosphate only. There's probably a discussion to be had about other nutrients, nitrogen. But it would be interesting to hear from the authors, the Environment Agency and Natural England, as to where they think that this actually leaves us. Why, given that it's fairly clear what needs to be done, that there isn't more firm language about doing those things, and given with that we have with relative clarity now from the Office of Environmental Protection that there is a duty of care to achieve these things, how long it will be before there is a commitment to doing so.
I think in response to that, in terms of the DWPP, I think what it recognises current uptake measures. It also recognises the reduction in nutrients required. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody on this board, because it's quite well known. Now, we've got, as we know, quite a significant target in terms of nutrient reductions. Remember, we measure for phosphate rather than the other wider nutrients that we often talk about, particularly nitrogen. So consequently, the measures we've identified will lead to a wholesale reduction of nutrients. What it doesn't do, it doesn't achieve that river target. There are other rivers in exactly the same position whereby you have, I think we spoke about previously, a gap between what we've got now to where we would need to get to. We would need more evidence in order to get to that place. I hear the perhaps the concern of perhaps a lack of firmness within the plan, but that's where we are now. We don't have those measures to close that gap that have been identified through the modelling we've done. Consequently, there's opportunity through the research, there's opportunity to identify measures which can help close that gap, but we don't quite have that solution at this point in time.
Just to clarify, I'm not sure I understand the either the drawing in of other rivers into the conversation, because I don't think that's relevant, or why we wouldn't be doing, given that the diffuse water pollution plan says that if we do everything that's outlined in this document, we reduce by 65% the load on the river, and that gets us 65% of the way towards the overall 85%. So that leaves a gap still, which I fully appreciate needs to be understood and examined what more could be done. But I don't understand why we wouldn't do all of the measures that are included in the document in order to at least start the process of getting us that 65% of the way there. Can I get a clear answer on why we wouldn't start that now?
So I suppose to start with is, what are all the measures you're referring to? Are you talking about water protection zone, or what's the specific measures you don't believe are being delivered?
There is a range of options that are presented in the diffuse water pollution plan, which include, all uptake of a range of measures, which are made fairly evident in the document. But there's no commitment in the document to doing those things. I think that my concern is that we have very clearly written in the document, if we do these things, and we do all of these things, we get to 65%. And then there is nothing then in the document which commits to doing those at least, because we know we have to do at least that, So that's where it becomes very, I don't understand the conclusion that we would then not do those things. The mechanic by which those get done, I accept that there is different ways. The conversation needs to be had about how to get that done. But this board, surely, and the statutory officers who report to it, now have clarity on what needs to be done. They have a legal obligation to do everything they can to meet target. And so I really struggle to understand why we wouldn't do the things outlined in the document.
So the DWPP is an updated evidence base which identifies the actions needed to reduce nutrients. It doesn't deliver the target. So effectively, it gives you the direction. Now, it doesn't come with funding. We are delivering against those actions already. Some of them will need more investment. Some can be delivered through the work we're doing with the supply chain, through things like the high-level stewardship, which will come in. So that there are things happening. The focus regulation within the catchment. So in terms of, say, what you're asking for, I'm struggling to understand what you believe is missing in terms of the model reductions we can achieve with the measures we've got versus where you feel that's missing.
So just to be really clear again, there is a very clear set of options laid out in the document. It's laid out in a tabulated form, which allows you to understand if we do baseline regulate, with no action, this is where we get to. If we get full compliance with regulation, which would be a pretty low bar, but still one we're a fair way off, this is where we get to in terms of percentage reduction. I'm not going to list out all the numbers and actions, but what I would expect, given that now the EA has done that work to understand it and now fully understands the actions that need to be taken in order to get to just 65% as opposed to the 85% reduction, what I want to understand is, given the regulatory or the legal duty of the agency to try to achieve that, why we aren't seeing action in line with what is written in the report by the Environment Agency to say, here are the actions that we need to get 65% at minimum. We're going to get started on doing those. And you know, that's our plan. It's meant to be a plan. So in theory, we commit to doing that. And the bit that we still have to do is understand what extra things do we have to do to cover that extra 20%. And I think it's incumbent on the agency to commit to that and then require the resources that it needs from government in order to achieve it, because it is law to achieve that. And so I'd like to understand, why do we continue to flout that law, and why would the agency that is there to uphold that law not be 100% demanding of every aspect of the work that's going on in the catchment to move towards that through whatever mechanism it deems fit, because it's got a suite of mechanisms, you know, which are also outlined in that piece of work. So I still fail to understand how this pollution plan has been published without what appears to be a plan to follow its own recommendations.
So I would challenge on that in terms of the regulatory compliance. We significantly deploy majority of our West Midlands resource for agricultural compliance to the Wye. We are getting further government funding next year to boost those resources, and successive years beyond that. So where we are now, this is the starting point. We don't have all the answers yet, but this effectively provides the evidence for the direction of which we need to get to. We don't have all of those measures and those mechanisms there yet. This is where the regulation, the voluntary measures, the measures through natural England and catchment sensitive farming, through the research, through updated evidence, this is the direction to move us towards a reduction in nutrients towards that target. What we don't have is the solution to totally meet that target by 100%.
So what does the current suite of actions that you just described, what does it achieve, and in what time frame?
I can't answer in terms of what time frame, because some of that is out of my control. In terms of what we really have is a modelled reduction, and as we know, modelling gives a best estimate. So in terms of what that leads to, I can't tell you today. We do know, and I've shared the report with the board, that there are legacy issues, there are climatic issues. So there's a wide range. It's not just about nutrients. It's about nutrients plus wider river health. So I can't give you all those answers. What I can say to you is the updated evidence sets the direction to then deliver the measures that would be needed to reduce nutrients. It doesn't give you that total target.
In that case, can I request, and I'd like to see if there's any support around the room for this, based on what are the recommendations that are going to be taken forward that you understand currently and are published in the Diffuse Water Pollution Plan as stands, which is a series of things which appear to align with the very lowest options within the evidence provided and the options appraisal. Can I please get a best efforts, and I think this is reasonable to ask, from the team that has produced what they've produced, a forecast of of where we will get based on what is in the document and over what time frame, with reasonable confidence, because that's exactly what's been provided for a suite of other scenarios. But what is not provided in the document is, with the scenario that we are putting forward, this is where we think we'll get. And that's my deep concern with the document, is that it lays out what needs to be done, it lays out how to do it, and then it fails to say, this is what we are going to do and over what time frame. And I accept that there's more information, that there would be a lot of work to be done, but I think we're all here for that work. As the chair mentioned, we want to align the nutrient management plan with the catchment management plan. So any work which is being done, as a result of things identified in the catchment management plan, should entirely align with what's being presented in the Diffuse Water Pollution Plan and the Welsh Evidence Base. And hopefully, with real consensus around that and a joint effort, we can make sure that we go and find the resources to achieve it. At least we'll know how far away we are. But the Diffuse Water Pollution Plan does not tell us how far away we are if we do what is outlined in the plan, and that's missing.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you. I think Pat has made his point very, very strongly, and I think that Martin has, defended it as best he can. But ultimately, Pat's right. We need actions and we need timeframes. And without that, we're just meeting to agree things. I think we need, I've just looked at the plan, which I've got here. There are so many points that are headed up: delivery, actions and investigations. Well, we actually just need to know what is going to happen and by when, and what will be the impact of that, will be the reduction in kilograms. And without that, I don't think we have a plan. So I support Pat's request, and I think it's really essential that we start to deep dive on some of these things rather than just the generalisation. And in fact, that has been one of the judicial comments on the cost of bet plan, that there is insufficient detail of what we're actually going to do. So I would encourage both the EA and Natural England to say, can you please get your heads together, and can we have an action plan by when and what's expected results? Thank you.
No. Councillor Maybe?
Thank you. I think perhaps Pat and Andrew have said what I was going to say. I'm going to repeat it anyway, not least to show that I endorse their comments. I think from what Martin Quine said, it's clear that the current situation does not provide us with the nutrient management plan as such. It provides us with evidence base. We've also still got the issue of the two documents for two sides of the border, which makes no sense. So the next step, I think, has to be to combine these two, or to bring these two, to use both of these two as the basis for an actual plan, which does include the what, how, and the who and the when, and identify resource gaps. Again, we've said this before, totally understand that the anxiety on behalf of different bodies in the room that, hold on, we don't know how we're going to do this, that we haven't got the money. But if that's the case, we need to know and we need to be able to highlight it, rather than go along, with our fingers crossed. So I think we're all on the same page there so far, and I think it's and unless there was just one thing that worried me from what Martin said, that I wasn't quite sure if he was saying that there's still some lack of knowledge and it's not quite possible to develop the full plan. That was just a slight niggle from what he said there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, the reference really is when we look at the measures in terms of nutrient reduction. So we do that through modelling, and this particular one is farm scope R. So that gives us effectively the best guess in terms of what those measures will do in terms of a nutrient reduction. The modelling only gets so far; it cannot get us to the river target. So when I say we can't develop a plan that effectively achieves 100%, that's the gap that we still need to figure out.
Okay, thank you. I can see that James Marsden has his hand up, not a member of the board, but by the discretion of the chair, I will allow you to join in, James.
That's very generous of you, Chair. I'd just like to remind the board you've just agreed an 18% reduction by 2030, at least. So that's the minimum. Now I equate that to what Martin has just said and what is in the DWPP. It should be feasible to plot a trajectory and identify the gap between what is in the DWPP and what it will take you to get to 18% by 2030. That is what I heard, or I read into what Pat was saying. Beyond that, there is an even bigger gap that needs to be worked out. But now I want to just briefly change tack, because we have to remember that the regulators' budgets have been cut by 50% since 2010, even with the addition of some new money, as Martin has said. Furthermore, the agri-environment element in the measures is uncertain. We don't know what the budget will be. We don't know how it will be split between the 2.4 billion nationally. And furthermore, we don't yet know that there will be a ministerial direction to the regulators to target the available money at the highest risk or the most important outcome potential. So, given those uncertainties on behalf of the regulators, I think it's pretty unreasonable to beat them up. I guess I'd close by saying I think this, once we've worked out what the gap is, I think this is far better directed in a letter followed by a meeting with ministers rather than directed to Martin and Claire.
Thank you very much. Councillor Charlton.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Marsden. I think that was a really helpful interjection there. So I'm glad the Chair was able to let you come in, because I actually think that you have hit on some of the things that are worrying me. I think one of the things that I'm always a positive person. I've got to see the positive in everything. And we tend to sort of hang on to the negative on this board for some reason. There are some positives in there, and I think the biggest positive for me, I mean, it does say it's a plan, actually, Martin. So there is reason why you might be being attacked on the fact that there is no plan in there. It does actually say that it's a diffuse water pollution plan. So perhaps our need to see something more strategically planned out in there might have been useful. But let's just go, because in the conclusion and as part of this this document, and I think it will apply to the Welsh Evidence document as well, is that we can't do this on our own. Nobody can do this on their own. The Environment Agency is reporting back on this report, but you can't do it on your own. Natural England can't do it on its own. NRW can't do it on its own. The local authorities can't do it on its own. I think what we're missing here is how we can do this together. And you're absolutely right, Mr. Marsden. There are uncertainties. We've got a big uncertainty here in Wales coming up. Is we don't know who's going to be our government in May. There's a lot of question marks on there, but we can't keep on using uncertainties as a reason not to do something. I think it's time that we put the uncertainties there. We know what they are, but get on and do what we can do. So I'd be very keen to see with both of these reports, and I don't think we can separate them out, as Councillor Catchment has said. You know, the RIDE doesn't recognise borders, it's only us that recognises those borders. What can we do across those borders? And what can we actually do as a result of these plans? We've put a lot of effort into them. Fair amount of funding has gone into them as well. There's some really, really useful information in there. So what can we do with that now? So from this point going forward, so instead of saying, and one thing I'm not with you, Mr. Marsden, more letters, more politicians involved, you know, more pleas to people out there isn't going to get this done. We've got to do something on this board and within this board now. So that's my plea. Can we do what it says in the plan, which is work together? And can we find a way of doing that and putting a plan in place which is quite clear about who's responsible for what, who's going to monitor it, and who is going to be there to recognise what we're doing and where we're getting. So that's my little say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. And I think that's, you know, it's starting to coalesce. I think we will see this as the meeting progresses and we move through the Welsh evidence into the nutrient management plan, which is the logical place where all these ideas really need to come together and create that entity that we're missing at the moment, I think. So thank you. Louise, Mary, and then David.
I think the councillor makes an excellent point about the importance of these documents at the moment, despite being non-statutory, the amount of work that's gone into them and how well they sum up the problem. So I wanted to ask two things. They are already signed off and finished documents, but it's clear that the Nutrient Management Board isn't best pleased by them and doesn't feel that they really answer the questions needed. So can we input into the strategic priorities that have been identified in order to suggest other or additional strategic priorities for the Wye? And to address Martin's point about the lack of research and that makes it impossible to state what actions are needed, I suggest, in light of the urgency for the Wye and the legal timeframes, that we use the existing research not carried out on the Wye, but carried out in rivers all over the world and in the UK. That research has all been pulled together by WWF into a review document of all the measures on-farm measures that can reduce diffuse pollution. The work has been done, it's peer-reviewed scientific work, and it very clearly lays out the range of mechanisms that can, and highlights the effectiveness of different mechanisms and states the percentage reductions in phosphorus and nitrogen that each different mechanism can bring. I suggest we use that research to provide the clarity in what the strategic actions for the Wye should be.
I can step into responses to share there. So I suppose, first of all, just to comment, I think thank you for all of the comments so far. Me and Martin don't take any criticism of the plan personally, Pat, and yeah, just to reassure James on that front. You know, obviously we welcome that challenge in your thoughts and input. And just on the other point you raised, Pat, to come back to that, in terms of the actions, that the measures in the plan that Natural England have are within our remit, so that's the voluntary farm advice. Yes, we really target and put our resources into that to deliver those. There are many measures in the plan that require that collaboration, that require people coming together, and it's about how we do that and achieve that and deliver those more strategic aims that aren't within the agency's gift. It does require a genuine collaborative approach to deliver those. Just Louise, on your point, I think via the plan, which we will talk about, and I think I want to mention, obviously we have got an agenda item on the Nutrient Management Board approach to developing a plan, and I think that's where we add in other views. And in terms of using the WWF, those measures around the intervention farm advice. Yeah, we do have that data. The challenge is our mechanism at the now is voluntary. So we use that research and evidence to target our advice and try and deliver the best possible options we can using the mechanisms we have, which are increasing. We have some of those new mechanisms, but we do use that data and science in the work we do to try and make sure we are getting the best options we can in the right places.
Would it be possible, like one of those, measures that as the river I think about and talk about a lot, because a river isn't a channel of water, it's used as a pipe squeezed between farmland, and unfortunately that's the Wye on most of her length. That's not what a river is. So one of the key measures for reducing on-farm pollution is the buffering of not just the rivers and streams but farm ditches, and I don't see that listed as a strategic priority. Yes, we don't have currently a legal mechanism. It's certainly not included in any form of subsidy. 6 metres doesn't achieve anything. 12 metres doesn't really achieve much more. Talking about restoring the river and putting buffers in place as a normal practice, as good farming practice that becomes a cultural norm, that we don't farm right up to the edge of rivers, is what we need to see to restore the rivers across the UK. That isn't put here as a strategic priority. Why are we not finding new ways to deliver the things that are not part of subsidies but are proven mechanisms that would actually solve the problem tomorrow, including the legacy phosphate? If the buffers were wide enough, 100-metre buffers prevent the legacy phosphate leaching into the rivers. It's there. The knowledge is there. We just need to make that a priority for the Wye.
So the mechanism the mechanism to get that there isn't something we have right here, right now. So the mechanism we have is the voluntary farm mechanisms, which we're trying to use to the absolute best of our ability. And that mechanism, I hope works. But to get that uptake across the whole of the Wye catchment, how to do that and how to deliver that isn't something we have. It's certainly not something we have in either of our statutory gifts, and that's why I come back to that collaboration. Is there ideas? Is there different ways of thinking we could do to get every landowner to deliver that we haven't thought of yet? And that's where it comes back to that collaboration. But that I suppose we're getting a bit into the detail now, and I'm conscious of time, and it's that sort of discussion that will form part of the plan.
Because we're now getting a lot of people wanting to join in. Got Mary, David, Pat, Simon, and Councillor McDermott. So in that order, Mary.
You know how quick I can be when I'm making a point, so I'll be speedy. First of all, thank you for saying you don't take it personally, because I'm always very conscious that you two are there, and the conversation is, if you would like us to write a letter for you to direct up your chain, I think that would be something the board could gift you. Otherwise, you just have to take it for a bit and then know that you need to disseminate it to the other people. My main concern with this plan is that it doesn't do what it was supposed to do. So it doesn't say what actions are required by when to restore favourable conditions in the Wye. Now, you will say it's a non-statutory document, but it still has a legal responsibility to meet the tests of a compliant plan. And that might be picked up in something that the MacDonald people are doing. It might be something that the catchment plan can pick up, but every plan should have those same benchmarks. And you've already admitted, the plan admits that it doesn't contain a suite of actions that restores favourable conditions. It doesn't even close the gap. What you could have done is written a plan that did do all those things, and then say, these are beyond the levers we have to our, in our bag of tools. What would the government do about that? Because it's the government's ultimate responsibility through the holding of a statutory plan, which will be the River Basin Plan, I imagine, to restore the catchment. So we hamstrung ourselves by having a plan that didn't do what it was supposed to do. So there's no assessment of the water protection zone, which I'm desperately trying to think of another name for it so that nobody gets upset by it. But we do know that we're going to have something that is bespoke to the lug, if not to the Wye and the lug, that is beyond all the things that are in the plan and all the things you have access to do. We can't rely on voluntary measures, but the plan is very heavily weighted in voluntary measures. We know that doesn't work because we've been doing it, well, 6.5 years, probably all of your working lifetimes. You know they don't work, so they're in the plan as pretty much carrying almost all of it. It won't be enough. We could have used the plan to communicate to other people what we have in the lug and the Wye isn't enough, and we need to do something different, which I think is what Simon might call systems change. We just didn't ask for it, therefore I don't think we can expect for other people to know that we need it. I'd be interested to know whether you or your agencies believe that it meets the thresholds that have been set by the OEP and the Upper Costa Beck ruling. Reading both of those, I don't believe this plan meets that kind of rigour. But there are some positives, and again, the plan kind of glided over them, but they're really good things. So is there any other catchment where the water company has delivered more than their fair share of phosphate reductions within the 10 years that they have? I can't find one. I think that's something we should have said. The lug and the Wye did this, and it's pretty brilliant. And it also is doing a lot of the heavy lifting again. So lots of your reduction relies on Welsh Water continuing with that. But you and I both know, even though the pie chart stops at AMP6, it should have included AMP7 at the minimum. It must include AMP8 as a projection. That's unfair not to contain those graphs. But that 14% is likely to be under 9%. There isn't much more they can go at. So again, it's a falsehood to say that if we continue asking the water company to reduce what they have, that we can get there. We can't, and I think we've all agreed that is the case. But it's still a positive, isn't it? It's a positive that house builders for the last 10 years have committed to having lower water use in their properties through a condition that the council set. That's a good policy lever that developers willingly took on board. It's a good thing that the house builders have paid for the wetlands and continue to pay for the wetlands at a cost of many millions of pounds, even though they're not the polluter. That, again, is kind of glided over in the plan. Nutrient neutrality as a mechanism to recover the river is kind of a bit of a, it's an imaginary status. It will never do that. Even if we deliver the 1,300 homes that Hereford is being asked to do, nutrient neutrality will never recover the catchment. It shouldn't be in there unless it's on there saying that. A water protection zone is the minimum I would imagine we would need to do to show that we can close the bigger gap. It might not be something we can ever do, but I think you need to say that that's what you would like to happen. Back to the percentage as well, this is my last point. You can't just say 85% reduction because it doesn't mean anything to anybody. You need to say how many kilograms of phosphorus need to be removed or reduced or eliminated. And you have to give reasons where that might come from. And it's not one thing, it could be 10 things. But it would be up to the market to decide how they do that. We don't need to argue that we didn't put in how you do it because we didn't think they'd want to do it, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? And I think that's all of them, I think. Just the thing about the other good thing the plan does, it identifies the catchment that is failing. So when the water comes in from Wales for the first 2 test points in the lug, it's fine or nearly fine. It's been fine a few years previously. As the arrow meets the lug, it starts to decline. And then when you get to your dilution point where the Wye and the lug meet, it seems to be okay again. If we are sensible, we would be asking DEFRA and everybody else with any money, because I know a lot of the people involved in this are taking in money to solve this problem, and yet we still haven't solved it. And that is beginning to irk me a little bit. You can't expect to have money if we don't fix it. At some point, we have to say all the money has been given has delivered the result that we asked for. But if you're sensible, that money should be going into the arrow by the looks of it, and we can then have a mini catchment and we can say we did this, this and this, it delivered this, this and this kilogram of reduction, and our testing points show that when the arrow meets the lug, it is no longer our Achilles heel, I think. Also, I should say that I'm the chair of the River Arrow Trust, so there you go.
Thank you. I mean, I think do bear in mind that a lot of these points are things that probably we need to carry forward into the nutrient management plan discussion, because they are things that you're saying that this plan should have, it doesn't have, it's not our plan. the nutrient management plan is the plan that is our plan or could be our plan, and therefore things like that. And I tend to agree with you about the kilograms. It's very difficult to know exactly, you know, how do you demonstrate what you need to do unless you have the right matrix to do that against. So just sort of bear that in mind. Really, what we're talking about is diffuse water pollution plan. David.
Yeah, I just wondered if Martin looked like he might have responded to the thing, particularly about Costa Beck and the OEP, and whether he thinks, I mean, I can't call it a plan. I think I can only call it a report because it has, you know, no time frame, no budget, no targets. So it's not really a plan by anybody else's understanding of that word. But I just wondered if you could respond to what was Mary just asked.
So I think it's important to not get mixed up between the diffuse water pollution plan and the Costa Beck. So rather than going into the detail, so what we've got is you've got the Costa Beck judicial review, which links to the River Basin Management Planning process. Okay, so really water framework directive. Consequently, it refers to having specific measures in order to achieve good ecological status. Okay, so it's specific to the Water Framework Directive. The Diffuse Water Pollution Plan, which was a separate judicial review, which relates to the habitats regulations. So essentially that looks at the SAC condition and the measures to achieve favourable conservation status. Consequently, within the two things really. Within the Costa Beck response, I think Mary mentioned it already. We're doing the work called Programme of Measures. So what that's looking at the moment is what are the programme of measures in order to achieve good ecological status. So that's our work related to the Costa Beck. The work we're piloting in the Wye with Mott MacDonald, so those that are involved with the catchment partnership, is looking at an enhanced version of that. So how could the River Basin Management Planning process be enhanced compared to sort of the standard process we're doing now? So that work is ongoing. I think some appointments may have come out today from Mott MacDonald to develop that work further. To a certain extent, with the diffuse water pollution plan and that judicial review, it's for the claimants that would consider whether they believe that it's met the objectives within the consent order, which essentially gave the direction around what DEFRA and the EA needed to deliver. I don't know whether that's answered it, whether you want, I mean, Mary, you covered certainly a lot in your piece there, but they are two separate things. The other thing I was going to mention is that the Water Framework Directive targets, so the targets in the Wye are slightly different to the LUG, that they reflect the majority of high status, what we call high status in Water Framework Directive. So it's your top status of Water Framework Directive. So their targets do reflect that. What we also know is as you come down the lug, only the lower part of the lug is within the SAC. So the targets do change as you come down the river because a SAC has a higher target than being outside of the SAC. The other thing is that the SAC for England only covers the main body of the Wye and the lug. The River Basin Management Planning process will consider the wider sub-catchment. And then my final point, I think really around sort of that data and evidence, well, whilst the target in terms of nutrients is close on the Wye, we see a lot of information about phosphates and nutrients within the Wye, and actually largely the Wye does actually pass the target. And I think perhaps in terms of, say, going forward, to actually talk about what the data and evidence is showing us, gets perhaps everyone on the same page, and then perhaps we're all talking that common language, whereas I think at the moment, I think some of the emotion, some of the emotive elements to what we all talk about, and like Claire said, look, we're here to represent our organisation. We don't take it personally, but actually, I think that will help perhaps get that common understanding around what is happening and what's not happening.
Okay, thank you for that. So, can I just ask about the WPZ? Because that seems to me really the major omission here is that you've identified a whole lot of measures that aren't going to work by your own evidence. And why didn't you evaluate a water protection zone, given that it's taken 10 years to produce this report? What has prevented you from providing an evaluation of a water protection zone?
So just to be clear, we haven't developed a plan which has not identified the measures that are available to reduce nutrients. So it's not like we've identified wrong measures. What we've identified is the measures that are currently available. Just on that, in terms of the water protection zone, the water protection zone. When we put a the water protection zone is the mechanism. Really, it's what you put in the water protection zone, which is the key.
Yeah.
So at the moment, I think there's some obvious things. I think like Louise mentioned already in terms of buffer strips and the usual sort of measures in terms of that riparian corridor. That in terms of our current evidence, even putting one in with the measures that we know, will still not meet that target. So as you know, we haven't excluded it within the plan. What we've said is we'll do a feasibility study. Now, what I can't tell you today is when that will happen and what that process will look like.
But you said at the start, this is a starting point. After 10 years, we've got to a starting point, and you haven't either had the staff, the skills, the time to evaluate a water protection zone. Yet it's clear for everybody here that there are a whole series of mechanisms that could be put into a water protection zone that would start to improve the quality of the river. Now, you said it might not close the gap. That's not really the issue. Is can we get started doing some things that will improve the quality of the water? I just don't understand why, as an agency, or both agencies, you haven't been able to put that forward after 10 years.
I suppose my final response on that is 10 years was the judicial review. We haven't been writing the plan for 10 years. We've been working on the plan in 18 months. So this is the start of the plan, the updated evidence. It's not that we've taken 10 years to write, and I think you know that. So this is the starting point of that, and that sets the direction. I haven't got all the answers today, but I suppose without repeating, I think this is where we are at this point in time.
Only if it's really quick.
I'm not sure I agree, Martin, about the OEP and the Upper Costa Beck ruling, because the government conceded on the Upper Costa Beck on the second hearing that there was a mechanism for plans to be made in a certain way that made them legally compliant. So I know you guys can't answer it, but I would urge the Environment Agency to look at whether this plan complies with how you make an environmental plan, which Article 6 does say how it's done. But I think the Upper Costa Beck does say that all plans should be made on the same basis.
So the DWPP does translate to the programme and measures work, so the Costa Beck work, so effectively they do dovetail, so it's the measure and the mechanisms feed into the programme and measures work, so they're not kept in silos. And to a certain extent, I can't really comment on the OAPP findings, and it's probably not my place to do that.
I think that's something the board can comment on, then we could do something about our concerns regarding that.
Yeah, I'm just going to say we have to be a bit mindful of the time. If we want to have a good amount of this meeting to talk about the nutrient management plan, which is actually the bit that we potentially would control, which we don't with the diffuse water pollution plan, can we just bear that in mind as to how deep we want to go with this, because the meeting is only as long as it is, and then we will have to finish.
Could you help me out? As a member of the public and not a member of the board, do I need to declare an interest? Because
No.
Good. Because some of you know I'm related.
You're not a member of the board, and you've
Therefore,
spoken
I don't need to. Thank you.
Just at
Helpful.
my discretion. Thank you. Thanks, James. I'm just going. So there's a matter of accuracy in the DWPP on page 111, talking about water protection zones, correctly reporting Heritage Council requested it, but this Nutrient Management Board also voted in favour of a water protection zone at about the same time. So just for accuracy. And again, it's sort of a point, and this applies, I think, across both the evidence bases, that they look at they do a cost-benefit analysis of potential actions, and I think it would be fair if the cost-benefit analysis also included the costs to the house building industry, the costs to people who use the river, and also that the benefits might also include things like flood alleviation, flood prevention, biodiversity net gain, other things. So I think we need to be not just looking at whether or not it's going to cost a farmer some money to reduce their pollution. In my view, and I think that's something that possibly then, you know, whatever we decide to do today in terms of nutrient management plan, we might want to take that into consideration and look at things more holistically. Okay, so Pat.
Yeah, just want to say appreciate that the comments made earlier about this not being personal. It certainly isn't. I mean, all the people in this room, most of them have been turning up, you know, to each and every catchment management partnership, Wye Catchment partnership, to nutrient management boards, etc., putting a lot of effort in to try to all work towards the same goal. So I just want to highlight that is the case, and I think everybody recognises that. So just thank you for saying that, and worth saying out that out loud. What I wanted to just reiterate and ask us, and make sure that the ask is very clear on, is that you know, in the DWPP, it says for the lug an 85% reduction of loads is required from diffuse sources, and targets are unlikely to be unattainable through current suites of agricultural measures. The recommendations of the report, after looking at the levels that could be achieved through the various suite of measures that are potentially available, then goes on to recommend 5 strategic areas of action. What I want to understand is, if we do follow those 5 strategic areas of action as outlined, and I fully appreciate that those are the only ones available as the agencies currently see it, what we really need for the nutrient management plan, for the catchment management plan, and for this board is a clear understanding of, if we do go down the path that is outlined currently in the document, what is the reduction we expect to see and over what time frame. I think that's what we need in order to continue to take this conversation forward, because I fully support the statement made by Martin earlier that this does get us, this document, one thing it does do is get us a long way down the line in terms of clarity of where we stand. And what we now need to know, the missing piece of information is, we know there's a gap. How big is the gap? And over what time frame does that gap either widen, and it may widen, or tighten and get us towards the target, because that is absent. And I would ask the Environment Agency and Natural England to come back with numbers that tell us where on that chart of from 0 to 10, which starts at 0 change to 42% of the 85%.
Yeah, but rather than trying to rewrite a diffuse water pollution plan, which is already a thing, why is that not something that we would put into a nutrient management plan?
We're missing that information. We're missing the information as to what is the thing that is recommended in this document. What it doesn't tell us is what the agencies believe they will achieve doing what is written in the document. Okay, so that's, if we know that much, if the honest answer is, okay, well, we think 18%, okay, we understand the gap.
Okay, so Martin, is it possible to expand the DWPP to include a trajectory of what will be achieved?
I'm unsure. What I would say is that the DWPP is an Environment Agency and Natural England document. We've made it publicly available. It is an updated evidence. I think the conversation probably needs to move on to the Welsh evidence to the NMP. I think from going round in circles. Look, I can go back and I can provide feedback. It doesn't mean I can come back with the answer. So that's what
that's
I'll
fine.
do. I'm just making some notes of the key themes.
Okay, that's fine. Simon.
My comments can come in the Welsh part, but in short, we've just spent an enormous amount of time on an issue that if we reduce phosphate levels to zero, we would still have a river that was chronically failing its conservation status. And there are other actions that can be taken that would bring the river back into favourable conservation status that mean we wouldn't spend any time on phosphate. And the linkage between phosphorus, in all the plans that I read, there's calling it phosphorus when it's phosphate that we're monitoring. And we're calling it phosphorus, when total phosphorus is blind. Statutory monitoring is blind to total phosphorus. And we're not including that in the thinking. And I'm sorry, we're dancing on the head of a pin here. Yeah. And let's talk about the Welsh one.
Yeah, I think also just on the point of things other than nutrients.
So at the danger of being voice of the river.
This is the Nutrient Management Board, so it's kind of what we obsess about, I'm afraid. So if you, but the broad conversations happen elsewhere. Councillor McDermott.
My comment was concerning something that was in the state of the discussion about at least 20 minutes ago when the Environment Agency people were on the defensive talking about the need to the constraints of having a voluntary approach. Well, I mean, I think since the Cunliffe report, this water legislation is now out. I don't know what state it's in at the moment, but I know there was a question asked by the APPG in Parliament this afternoon. The constraint is that there's a voluntary approach by the sound of what we're saying, and could we not really give a nudge at a political level, or what is the scope for doing that, to turn towards some sort of non-voluntary stuff, especially as you cited various strategic issues. Strategic issues would include water supply into the future, given that we get very extensive house building commitments, and also, sewage management, wastewater management. Is there no scope for trying to go up a gear at the political level from this meeting?
Yes, I think that's a fair comment. Probably something really, we do have a kind of a political wing, as it were, of the in the catchment. So the commissioners could consider that. I mean, I think that there is a big question there around voluntary. It's, I hear it again. There's all these things that is a problem. If everything is voluntary and uptake is insufficient and there's nothing you can do to compel uptake, then that is an intrinsic, inherent problem. Simon?
Very short and hopeful addition. I've just been jotting this down on a piece of paper. Since this became a priority, we had the Refocus report. The water company has done more than its fair share. House builders are doing more than their fair share with the offsetting wetlands. We had 400 farmers in a room at the Green Man saying we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. We've now got P audits of farms, and farmers are looking at their manures coming in and going to P negative scenarios, something that the plans say is impossible, but actually we're proving in reality is possible. We've got Avara exporting the poultry manure. We've got Noble paying 2 pence a litre, 2 pence a dozen for farmers who look after their manures. We've got Arla paying 1.7p a litre for farmers who look after their manures and don't over-apply their manures. And if you look at figure 9 of the Welsh plan, we've got a declining level of winter loading of phosphate being picked up by the citizen science monitoring. And the citizen science monitoring, I just looked at it at Wye this morning, you can see clearly where the soil is coming from. It's coming from the flank of the Black Mountains. So the light soils ringing around the Black Mountains is where the heaviest loads of soil are coming off. And I got detoured today, Whitney, to drive the road around the back of Mockers. Geez, I could see firsthand that that's where all the soil is coming off.
So join the dots.
Yeah. So we're, and also, why are we talking about phosphate, which is a soluble thing, being lost in soil? Just think about that for a second as a scientist. It doesn't get lost in the soil, it gets lost in the water because it's soluble. It doesn't get lost unless we're talking about other forms of phosphorus, which are not being monitored. Over and out.
That's a fair point. One thing that I am curious about is the surface and groundwater source protection zones and whether or not we've ever issued guidance as a result of having water source protection zones. It's in the DWPP, so I'm just kind of curious about it.
I'm not sure. I'll have to take that one away.
Okay, so because it says where you've got a source protection zone, and we do have them because that's where we have at-risk water, ground surface water. That you can issue guidelines to minimise pollution risk, especially regarding the use of fertiliser and pesticides. And I just wondered if we'd ever use that power. Right. Okay, that's it. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the Welsh evidence, if we may. And I have to say, it's interesting that the two documents, to contrast the different way in which they're presented and the different approaches taken. I just think it's kind of interesting. And again, it's a challenge, perhaps for the overarching document. How do we align things that are actually quite obviously different in their approach? So that I think is something that we will have to address, along with the point that Mary made about kilograms or measuring. Again, the cost benefit analysis point, which I've made earlier, about needing to be a bit more holistic to be in the plan. Right, so has anyone got any comments on the Welsh Evidence Base? Simon.
Phosphorus. All the way through the plan, they're talking about phosphorus, and every monitored parameter is phosphate. I'm sorry, we can't. The terminology in it made me cry. But anyway, there is hope in it. It's structured. It's well argued. The farm scope of V5 is a very, very good thing. The monitored against the predicted on farm scope of V5 is really quite accurate. So it's a good tool to use. But I come back to UK TAG 2012 review of phosphate showed that at best 50% of rivers, after cranking down the levels, which are the ones now adopted in Wales, only 50% of rivers are showing ecological levels that fit with their phosphate target. You've got a thing called the Wye Algal project that has shown very clearly that the thing that's driving algal populations is flow, light and heat, not phosphate, and with ammonia and nitrogen coming in as well. But phosphate levels are commonly zero during algal blooms because it's used them all up.
Okay, we've got Jed Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a small comment. It's not a technical one. My only concern with this document, or my main concern with this document, is the lack of ownership over the recommendations and the actions. Under the monitoring side of things, there's a degree of ownership, but all the other actions and recommendations, there's no organisational ownership. Now, it may be that that's something that comes later with the nutrient management plan, but it was just a concern I wanted to flag.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Thanks very much, Jed. Councillor Maybe?
Thanks. Yeah, I found this one very incredibly clear and useful to read, actually. But yeah, I agree that it got so close to being a really good plan, and then it's just missing that last bit. But it's a really good. It's very close to it. I'm going to ask a really stupid question. I keep looking at this and I can't make sense of it, and it may be just me, but the source apportionment doesn't add up to 100%, and I'm missing something. Please, somebody explain it to me. So we've got agriculture 87%, wastewater 7%. I did also wanted to ask, is that after having done the work on wastewater treatment works that's already been done? Is that what date is that taken from? And then we've got 2% other, but we're left with a gap. I don't get it. Help, please.
Yep, I don't know. Do we have Anne Reedy? Oh, we have Dan Humphries who's possibly got an answer for you.
I've got a feeling they were Yeah, I've got a feeling for this report they focused in on the failing water bodies in the catchment, and that's potentially kind of some of the percentage kind of changes that were there.
It
when
is
we
just
look,
failing water bodies, you're right, but wouldn't it still add up to 100% though? I don't,
I'm unsure kind of if there's other elements kind of in the other passing or kind of close to passing kind of water bodies that were included, you know.
Which
So
page is
yeah,
Catherine talking about? Which page, Catherine?
I think
I'm actually looking at the summary at the moment, the numbers in the executive summary.
I think page 18, the lowest block, you've got 23% sewage treatment works, 72% rural land use, 2% overflows, and a further 3% from other sources. Knowing these numbers reasonably well, I think I know what it is. There's actually several sets of numbers which divide the catchment up into upper and lower and overall, and I think some of the numbers are simply being confused here. So I think actually what we're probably looking at, I think, is that the sewage treatment work number is a little high for the upper catchment.
On page 21, Pat, there's a pie chart. 87% agriculture, 6% other, 7% wastewater. I presume that's after. Yeah, it adds up to 100, but I presume that's after AMP7, which would I get to about 9%.
That's looking just at the failing ones. So that does add up.
So I think that adds up to 100, and
Yeah,
I think that's
no,
about
it's
right
it's.
from
I
what
think
projected
Catherine
forward.
must be talking about the ones on page 18. So yeah.
But
Thank you.
it's a good wider point, Catherine. We have to get universal information, otherwise we're all going to be wondering, and the messaging gets lost. But one of the problems we're going to have between these two documents is they're formatted and delivered in such different ways, including very, very different information, a lot more granular in Wales than the DWPP. For the Nutrient Management Board to prepare a plan, or somebody else to prepare a plan that aligns these two and merges them, is going to be really, really hard. But also they do have different challenges. The two areas do have different challenges.
Yeah, completely agree. Okay, Councillor Charlton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Mary there actually that they did look like almost like two different plans. And as a non-professional and reading this as really lay person, I did find it much easier to read the Welsh document, the Welsh Evidence document, and I can see from sort of some of the points that I've made that actually there is more information in there about addressing the gaps and targeting funding and looking at where we can make a difference, where we can actually do something. And I think that's what's really important with both of these plans. As I said that earlier, we need to have something as, if you like, as lay people to understand that there is something happening and there are actions. And I think that's a little bit clearer. It's not to say that it's not in the other plan. I just found this easier to address when I was going through it. And again, what comes out is agriculture is the main culprit, and I think we've all known that, but we're all still dodging around the fact that, and as it's been mentioned previously, that all of the measures that are put in place for agriculture are all voluntary, and we know we're not going to be able to get over that. So I'm just wondering, how do we take that away and do something about it and actually get something happening in agriculture? I'm not saying it hasn't been done before. I'm sure, Mary, you're going to tell me how much has been done, but we can't keep going on and saying this needs to be done and nothing's happening about it. But I think it's also pleasing to see what the water companies have managed to do, and that the measures have been put in place have been successful. So I think we can take some positive measures, or we can take some positive information out of that one as well. So thank you. You're going to come back and tell me something, Mary?
No, I was just going to say it's a good point, because the voluntary measures and the supply chain measures you can quantify them. So that would be one of the things for the DWPP where you could have had quite a positive spin on some of the voluntary measures or the agricultural measures. So I didn't know, Simon's just said that, Arla, Noble have both changed their supply payment chain relating to manure. Somebody should be reporting that back to the board with quantifiable impact. So if they're paying Wye farmers 2% more, Simon, you need to tell us what that means those people are doing, because otherwise the supply chain doesn't get any relief either. But also the Avara roadmap is used quite a lot in the DWPP as a kind of support mechanism for agricultural measures. The roadmap doesn't mean anything unless we can get it made legally and scientifically certain and held in perpetuity through the contracting system. But why aren't we asking Avara, what numbers have you got? So if you're exporting X amount of manure, we now know that means that that amount of manure is not going onto the ground in terms of phosphorus phosphate, therefore it can't be lost. So they do have things they've done. I didn't know any of that. So somebody somewhere isn't telling the board what we need to do to put these numbers into lines that we can say, tick. I think Natural England did have a good stab at CSF a long time ago. I think it was 9% reduction, but we didn't know what the 9% was for. But if somebody's getting money for a slurry cover, you can quantify how much phosphorus would be not lost from that, or a concrete yard, or all of the measures that they're being paid for. Let's get them in and get some wins. Otherwise, it's just kind of difficult to say, let's do more of it, because we don't know what was achieved.
Can I come back very quickly, Chair? Just one last point before he goes on to somebody else.
Yep.
And it is very brief, actually. How can we bring these two reports together? Is it something that we can achieve today?
That's what we're hopefully going to go on to discuss
Thank you.
later on. Thank you. I could totally endorse what Mary's just said. Would ask all the delivery partners and people on the Nutrient Management Board who are cited on actions that apply to reduction or control of nutrients to please report that to the board. It's kind of the point of being here. I'm just going to pick up on the Welsh Evidence Base. That there's a point made about WPZ's recommended that existing levels of compliance improve before NRW introduce increased controls. Given the current level of compliance is around about 41%, I'm kind of curious as to how that's going to change, and is it really sensible to make that a precondition before you do something else? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I'd like some sense about that, and also I think picking up on the point that Councillor McDermott made regarding the problems with voluntary measures. Again, you've got on page 134, kind of weak uptake of voluntary measures, and I think that does indicate why that can't be relied upon. And the fact that it includes measures like do not apply P fertilisers to high P index soils, which frankly astonishes me that that's a voluntary measure, and even then it's not taken up. So yeah, I'd be interested in comment on that from Anne, who's joined. Hello, Anne.
So just on your point around compliance and water protection zones. So the control of agricultural pollution regs, they were phased in over a number of years. They've only really been fully implemented for just over 12 months, and a lot of the improvements that farmers have been required to make to comply with those regulations are not things that can happen instantly. So there are a lot of notices that have been issued onto farmers around infrastructure and slurry storage, and those are sort of key parts to sort of getting sort of fully compliant with those regulations. So we're still seeing the kind of the improvements, that we haven't seen the full improvements through the implementation of those regulations yet. They are still happening, and they're probably going to take a good further sort of 2 or 3 years before we actually start getting that compliance figure up. I think, did you just sort of mention, I can't remember what you said about compliance, was it 40-something% or something? So
yes,
that
41
will increase over time. We have to be sort of reasonable with these things are expensive to build, so we allow farmers time to get that infrastructure improved, and that's through sort of the use of enforcement notices. But it is an enforcement response, and they will be required to do that work ultimately. The no spread zones are being imposed now. I think we were talking about sort of protection zones before. In effect, we have sort of closed periods now for spreading, throughout the year, especially the winter months. That season is just lifted now in Wales. So the impact of having those sort of closed seasons is still yet to be sort of fully seen. So I think that's why the sort of the water protection zone sort of plan for Wales, we've still got a lot to sort of realise, I think, from the legislation that we already have. So that's really why WPZs are not really sort of any higher up on that sort of list of options. What was your second point? Sorry, Alyssa.
I was just making the point that I found it astonishing that do not apply P fertilisers to high P index soils as a voluntary measure. But you don't feel the need to go into that now, because we probably should move on. So yeah, Pat, Andrew, then we do need to move on to talk about the nutrient management plan, how that's going to come about. So are your points very urgent and necessary? No, Andrew?
Well, it's a nice link, actually.
Okay, go for it.
I think I should just remind us all that if we're trying to bring the two evidence plans together, a lot of people have been critical of one or the other. We need to understand where they came from. The DWPP was as a result of a judicial review and was something the EA had to write to clear its own backside. This review, the Welsh, was commissioned to our independent people. So it's really easy for an independent company to write something that they have in Wales. I have deeper sympathy to say that if you are an employee of the EA and you're responding to something that's judicial, I have no doubt, they probably won't admit it, but there would have been a lot of pressure from on high to put it in a particular way. If we had hindsight, we'd have actually commissioned both reports in identical formats. But the opportunity now is to work out how we put them together, and that's what we're here to do. Let's have an
lovely
NDP.
segue. Okay, thanks for that. So we're going to now talk about what we do next, the nutrient management plan. So clearly the options are going to be, we don't do one. We do one, and it's a standalone document commissioned and paid for by whatever, the Nutrient Management Board, the local authorities, I don't know. Or we align with an already in-train piece of work, which is the development of the catchment management plan, and the nutrient management plan is in some way part of that developing plan. And there's a lot of synergy between the two groups, and I think that's worth noting, that there are many people who come to the Nutrient Management Board who are also on the Catchment Management Plan. So there's a lot of, we're sighted on each other's work in a way that I think probably maximises the chance of really good dovetailing and not too much duplication. Yeah, so that's sort of where we're at. So kind of we need to bottom out today. I mean, really by the end of the day, I want to be able to say, this is what we're going to do out of those options, and start to bottom out what we think this plan needs to do, look like, and achieve, and how we're going to get that detail into this process. Yeah? So, Gemma, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, so I've got two comments. One's on behalf of the SOG and the other one's on behalf of Herefordshire Council. So on behalf of the SOG, we discussed it at the last Statutory Officer Group meeting, and there was consensus at the SOG that we would prefer as statutory officers a single plan with a single set of objectives, even if it's the Wye Catchment partnership plan with bolt-ons that aren't covered, if we need something extra from Nutrient Management Board. But as statutory organisations with limited resources, it makes much more sense to all be pulling in the same direction and working to the same goals. So that was we discussed it at SOG, and that was the feedback from SOG. In terms of Herefordshire Council, we've got an appetite to take a coordinating role as well. So we've got some resource in my sustainability team, where we're looking at some of the sort of reserve funding that we've got to pay for a bit of officers' time to help coordinate this. Officers are already working with the Catchment Management Partnership, so we can see an opportunity to throw in a few resources, as much as we can given our budget announcements yesterday, which isn't a great deal, but to help with it and bring it together as well. So the sort of supporting what Alyssa said, the preference from the SOG and the sort of direction from Herefordshire Council would be, if we can make it happen, a single plan, please.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks, Chair. Yeah, hugely welcome on both counts, I think, that to hear those things. The overlap between the nutrient management plan and the catchment management plan in terms of the things that would be measured, the objectives set, and the activities kind of proposed in a plan in those two different things, the overlap is 100%. So every objective that the Nutrient Management Board has is already sort of as specified in the specification of the catchment management plan has been outlined as needing to be included. So it should be theoretically straightforward to agree that, and I think I look forward to perhaps passing a motion in a moment. The thing I wanted to certainly very welcome to hear that there might be some resource to help. There's a task and finish group which is being spun up now for the catchment management plan. So yeah, we'll hear more about that hopefully soon. So that's also very welcome to have some resource from the council that could actually be used perhaps to help administer that and make sure that there is that the output of the work being done by the consultants on the catchment management plan absolutely meet the goals of both the Nutrient Management Board and the Wye Catchment Partnership and all of its members. And that's the key. The last bit is the key: is that the communications to its members in and out of that process is vital. And then I just wanted to mention on the evidence that we've seen, the two evidence bases that we've seen. I think the key slippage between the two is that we've got on the Welsh side a well articulated sort of set of measures per sub-catchment area, so it's per water body, which is really helpful. Mary highlighted earlier that on the English side, it's pretty well known where the things are, but we see another level of detail in the Welsh document, which says, for example, on the Irvon, 2 segments of the Irvon can be achieved using, according to the analysis, Welsh agri-environment measures alongside uptake of regulatory baseline, which we've heard some hopeful things from Anne, which is really good. But that one segment would require what they describe in here as all possible measures plus p-index 2 or below in soil, which is the level of specificity I think that we need in order to make a really, really mature and sensible plan for both the Nutrient Management Board and Wye Catchment Partnership. Just to reiterate the goals of the Catchment Management Plan, it is a 10-year plan with the objective of achieving good ecological status, so good SAC triple SI status, which includes, yes, the objectives that we've been talking about in this forum of water quality, but more importantly, that it is the achieving all of the objectives as laid out in the SSA triple SI objectives, which are more ecological. You know, they are species specific. So I think that's worth keeping in mind that there is complete overlap, but that the overarching goal is one of a 10-year return to good status for the SAC triple SI on both sides of the border. I just wanted to make sure everyone in this forum knew that.
I mean, I think just to sort of pick up on where we started this afternoon with the point that James Marsden was making, and I think that's a good idea that having a 10-year plan is great, but we need to have interim targets and trajectories to those targets within this plan. I'm not saying about the catchment management plan, but certainly as far as the nutrient management element of it. So that would be something that I would like to stipulate now to go in the plan. I think there's also maybe some potential. It seems to me that I've had conversations going round and round about voluntary and mandatory and WPZ, that perhaps there's some role within this process now that the nutrient management plan does some of the lifting on the evidence base for WPZ and starts to move that forward. Is a thought we could in some way be of assistance to the regulators and in moving it along, because it seems to me that where you've got 2 evidence bases that are saying even if we max out on everything we've still got a problem, it's inevitable that something else has to happen. There's this great quote from Lincoln about we must disenthrall ourselves. In other words, sort of business as usual is not probably where we need this plan to go. She says the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. So we need to write the plan that will move the dial, not just a general plan of nice things that we might do. And that would be something that I'd ask the plan to achieve. Andrew.
I think there probably is a general agreement that there's a benefit in ensuring that it is one plan. My only concern is that I would like to see a sort of halfway house, because I'd like the Nutrient Management Board to actually take on the responsibility for working with the consultants to produce a plan. I think that if there's additional costs, we've said that we got funding there, but I would like to see a standalone nutrient management plan that mirrors what's going on in the Wye Catchment Partnership, but I think that there are a number of things that are requirement, the plan that we as a board have. One is clearly Herefordshire Council's requirements on housing and all that sort of thing, which feeds into the local plan. We are focused on nutrients, which I think gives us an advantage over the holistic plan of the entire Wye Catchment Partnership. We also are accountable, and we have our meetings in public, which I think goes a long way, and we have minutes, etc. The nutrient management is important also, and very much so in planning. So I come round, I've gone round and round with this. I think they should be aligned, but we should ask the consultants, if they've now been appointed, to produce a plan that can be extracted and managed by the Nutrient Management Board. Because if it, I come back to, you are a council, we are accountable. If it's just left to the Wye Catchment Partnership, I've got nothing, I sit on the Wye Catchment Partnership as well, but I can see the advantage of actually having a focus on nutrients.
Okay, so I think the proposal probably is that the plan is written because it's sort of sensible, because the catchment management plan is already underway, and because it's part of the catchment management plan anyway, and it avoids duplication. But that plan would then, as it were, be an element that could be detached and brought and be actioned, or that the Nutrient Management Board, has that particular relationship with the plan that the Catchment Management Partnership doesn't have. And that was my kind of understanding of that, because otherwise I agree with you. What are we going to talk about otherwise? So that makes sense to me, because the Catchment Partnership has got an enormous range of things that it needs to cover, and there's a particular reason why this particular topic got detached in the first place, and it's because of that needing that kind of extra focus. Although I really welcome the fact that we've now got fantastic kind of people on both boards, so everyone's cited on everything. They're picking up on the task and finish idea as well. So clearly it would be appropriate for Nutrient Management Board members and Nutrient Management Board to have a feed into this process in some way. So how would that be achieved? Are you still setting up task and finish? And so Pat?
Yeah, and I'd also, so where I know a little bit about the membership of the task and finish group, it hasn't been officially announced. The steering group of the Wye Catchment Partnership will, but yeah, I mean, fully support the idea that there be a place on the task and finish group for the Nutrient Management Board. And be that yourself, Alyssa, as chair, or whoever might be nominated. I think that makes lots of sense. There will be overlap, but it is useful to have a specific seat on that board. I wanted to ask, while I have the mic, just a question of Natural England and Claire, which Claire very helpfully answered a question that I had around the nitrogen aspect of the nutrient, the nutrient question, which I suppose is both part of what the Nutrient Management Board needs to address, but also, as we heard earlier from Simon, phosphate and phosphorus is not necessarily the limiting function on the health of the river. And as such, I know that Natural England are in the process of reviewing evidence now to assess whether there might be a need for some kind of nitrogen aspect. I wanted to just ask, because the last time this body received an update on that, I think was last January, how close we are to getting to the point of having evidence that can be addressed, and just so that it's clear as to where in the timing of things that might appear, and help us plan what the what the catchment management plan will have as things that it can officially adopt, as opposed to having to go off and perhaps address and say, we know we have a nitrogen problem from the algal project, and from other evidence sources. So we either have the option of the catchment management plan consultancy going off and trying to come up with targets, but that would be madness if there was already some official targets coming for nitrogen. So I just wanted to ask the question in this forum as to whether we're getting any closer to that.
Very quickly, the Wye algal project pointed at ammonia, not nitrate ammonia, as the issue. So it's not nitrogen. It's one particular form of nitrogen, the most readily available form of nitrogen, that was the issue.
Thanks, Simon, for the scientific clarity. It's always really welcome. So on that question, so what Natural England is doing is, as you well know, we've conducted a condition assessment for the lug and the Wye. We will do the analysis and the assessment of both those condition assessments, and part of that, following that, we would then consider if, as a result of anything that comes out of those assessments, a nitrogen target is necessary for the river. There is no other river, and the GNCC guidance is that nitrogen target doesn't usually add value. That does not in any way mean that it shouldn't be considered in the whole health of the river, or it's not important. It just means whether a target is going to be put forward or not. So that assessment will happen. In terms of an update, in terms of when those assessments will be completed, the lug, we're hoping to be completed this spring, so we did the assessment this spring, and then the Wye following that later this year. But as I've said to you, Pat, we're committed to sharing any of the raw data and the details as soon as we can, and we won't necessarily wait till the full condition assessment, but we would wait for the full condition assessment before our National River Specialist did that analysis of whether a target was applicable or necessary for that. So yeah, and even then the timescales, if it was considered that a target would be helpful for this river, like I said, there's no other nitrogen target apart from one other, then that process would also take a considerable amount of time. So yeah, that's really, I think that's extremely helpful. And I mean, I don't know if NRW can sort of confirm what their position is on the same topic. Again, I think it's worthwhile just, while we've had some conversations, it's just worthwhile, for the record, especially as we're starting to think about bringing plans together and trying to achieve goals together, just making sure that that everyone's fully aware and there's no surprises. I suppose what the worst possible outcome would be is if the catchment management planning process went ahead and then something came out of nowhere. So I just wanted to, it's very good to have that, and just wondered if Anne had anything else to say from a Welsh perspective.
So NRW published their SAC compliance assessments and WFD assessments last year, so 2024, and the next one will be in 3 years. So 3 years from 24 is 27. So our next round will be 2027. So the most current one is last year's, which is included in that evidence base that we've been talking about today.
Okay, thanks. Helen Dale.
Thank you. I've almost forgotten my point. My hand's been up for so long. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. I guess, just going back to the original question, yes, I completely support the preference for a single plan. As I've sat here listening to the group, I think the problem with the Nutrient Management Plan Board producing a plan is that I think it would end up inevitably focused on a single issue of a water protection zone, and I think it would be very, very hard without a very strong, fully costed, risk-assessed evidence base for the CLA to sign up to that plan. So as a member of the board, we would not be able to sign up to a, we have to be able to sign up to the plan. So on that basis, that single plan, but also on that basis, that plan needs to be collaboratively produced. It needs to be costed, and the impacts of any proposals that are being considered need to be fully assessed within the plan.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it will be very, very, very collaboratively produced because it's going to be now kind of joint with the catchment partnership and sort of defined through that task and finish group, which hasn't formed yet. So I don't think that will be a problem. And the Nutrient Management Board would not be writing the plan. It would be part of that commissioned activity. Okay, Liz Bickerton.
Sorry, I thought Jackie was in front of me, Councillor Charlton, but...
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, she is.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
So,
Fine.
thank you. I was going to say that I haven't actually made a comment on this so far because it was obvious to me, you know, by reading all the papers that bringing together the DWPP and the Welsh Evidence Base into this coordinated plan is a huge task in its own right. So that's plainly obvious. I just want to say that I welcome the way forward that has actually been set out now in making that part of the wider catchment partnership. But sort of two observations really. Firstly, I mean, given the granularity of the NRW especially, just making sure that we don't get into another cycle of focusing on producing a plan, but we actually have a focus on action as well. And where does that come, I suppose? Is that a project by project? Is that initiative by initiative? But allied to that is my second point, and I think it feeds into something that Mary said earlier on about reporting to this Nutrient Management Board. I'm not clear that we're always being told some of the progress that is being made out there and some of the updates. Again, so we get lovely narratives about particular things like the Upper Wye initiative, but I'm not sure that we get the actual data that shows that we actually are making progress. So I wanted just to make sure that that we have an action-focused approach as well, and that we don't get into a cycle again of just talking about a plan of all plans, a plan to conquer all plans, whatever the phrase is. But there is a focus on action, and that action is reported to the Nutrient Management Board so that we've got a sense that we are making progress. And I think that's basically what I would like to see come forward from this discussion.
Totally agree. Thank you. Councillor Charlton.
Yeah, I totally agree with Liz as well, because my question was just going to be a very simple one, really. Who owns this plan? Because then if we know who owns it, then actually we can hold the feet to the fire more effectively. So I think we need, and I think the task and finish group can answer a lot of these questions. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going round and round and round. One simple question I wanted to ask was that I can't remember, Gemma suggested that Herefordshire have got some resources that they're very happy to put into this from the sustainability team. I can't say we've got resources from Powys, but I just wanted to make sure that the resources are going into the Nutrient Management Board, which means that, you know, we're not going to miss anybody out because they don't have any resources. So that was really kind of a question really, but I do think we have to bottom out who owns this plan. My suggestion is it has to be the Nutrient Management Board who owns the plan, but I don't know what impact that might have on the governance, who resources it, how that's taken forward, and all those other things that you have to consider, because so far the Nutrient Management Plan has been very much part of our statutory officers' plan and what they're doing, rather than something that we can monitor, evaluate and measure as we go along as a Nutrient Management Board. That's always been for me the most difficult part of this board meeting. How do we do that? Because I mean, Liz has picked it up. We really don't know, and I don't mind admitting I don't know, and I'm sure that most other people around the table feel a little bit the same. So it's about ownership of the plan really, and can we make that really clear at the beginning? Because we've already said the catchment partnership is just part of this, and others are another part of it. So who has got the overall control over this?
Thank you, Jackie. So the first part of your question, the resource I was talking about is some officer resource to help with bringing people together, developing the plan, reporting back to the various boards. It's not, at the moment, we're not at the stage of saying what we need to deliver the plan. So if you like, yes, it's a resource for actually both boards. I think Herefordshire Council are supporting the Wye Catchment Partnership, sorry, not a board, and the Nutrient Management Board. So it's just using as much resources as we can to get us where we need to be, and to have a plan with some clear actions, and we start working towards what resource we need in the long term. So to get us to that point, I'd love to be able to resource the whole thing, but obviously we're not there yet.
I'd like to be able to resource a lot more as well, but I know
Yeah.
we just have not got the money. And that's really helpful because in a way that helps with a bit of the answer to my question of who owns this plan, because I think basically what you're saying is it would be the board that owns the plan.
I'm completely agnostic. I think it's being developed with the Catchment Partnership and this board. I think that's a decision for the various boards, and I also think that one of the conversations that's really helpful as well is which bits are people going to contribute to when we have a plan, and which bits fall within their organisation. So I think, again, on behalf of the SOG, I'll just put a slightly different hat on. I think we had a discussion at Statutory Officer Group and recognised that that group don't own the plan, that each organisation's got a part to play, but also their own decision-making protocols, and we just need to be sensitive of that as well. So, and I think the reason that we're volunteering to step in is just try and help untangle some of these things and report to all the boards, and just think about how to get a bit of clarity on the decision making and the roles of everyone, so that when we get to the point of adopting something, we know the roles, everybody knows what part they've got to play, and we're being quite realistic about what we can deliver as well.
Thank you, that's helpful, thank you.
Andrew.
Just for clarification, can I just remind everyone that we have £150,000 of funding for this plan, and that will be the majority of the work that's required. If there's anything additional, we might seek a small amount to top that up. But that funding's there in place, and I think the consultants are almost in place. We're not quite sure, but they're pretty much in place.
Apparently.
Okay.
Early next week at the latest, and the steering group meeting to happen within 2 weeks. That's where I'm being messaged on Teams.
But just to reassure anyone asking the questions, the funding is there. We haven't got to worry about that.
Okay, Louise, and then I'm going to call it to a halt.
I felt like James had
No, James is not a member of the board.
I had a question for Martin, which I don't think you'll be able to answer today, but whether you could go back to the Environment Agency and come with a definitive answer to the next meeting. Alyssa's point about whether a nutrient management plan can do some of the heavy lifting to get progress towards a water protection zone. I'd like to know whether that can be the case or not from the Environment Agency, whether they will accept work from an outside board as a contribution to that process, because the reasons stated in here that a water protection zone is not being progressed, that a clear deliverable set of interventions have not been possible. So it's not possible to define the regulatory approach or build consensus to move forward, and that it would be a complex undertaking, of course. But I want to know whether, if we can lay out a series of actions that would be effective and go beyond voluntary measures which are proven to fail, that would be taken and used to help create a diffuse pollution, a water protection zone, if they can be shown to be effective measures that would be actionable. And also, just a quick question about the research funding. You mentioned that could be used to try and define what these mysterious actions are that will save the river, although they seem pretty obvious to me. Stop soil going into the river. That should be strategic priority number one. So I'd like to say that I would like that funding to be spent on applied research, testing the effectiveness of the actions in the nutrient management plan on the ground, in the Wye, on farms, and monitoring what happens if we do things that aren't possible within voluntary options?
So I think, yeah, thanks for that question. I think really it comes down to data and evidence. So we would consider all data and evidence like we have with we know there's vast sources out there, and you mentioned WWF earlier, and Claire referenced that. What I can't sit here today and say is that if you submitted a report or something that would advise us to introduce a water protection zone, that we would do that. I can't commit to that. But actually, in terms of data and evidence, of course we will consider all of that. So whilst we're saying not now, we're not saying not ever in terms of the DWPP. So yeah, the evidence, I think we agree, is really important. Now, in terms of the other bit you mentioned around the actions and soil loss, I don't disagree actually. I think when you look at the loss of soil, it's not always just overland flow. Similarly, it's how nutrients enter the river. It's not just through the surface, it's through the subsoils. And if you've seen the report we shared, it's taken a bit longer than we hoped. There's the workshop, which I know Simon's team are facilitating with Lancashire Wales to do with the research in a couple of weeks. I think the email's gone out. That is exactly the right place to be feeding this type of information in, exactly how you described it. Because there is an opportunity where we've got now 2 updated evidence bases. You know, we recognise, haven't we, the difference between both. Actually, as that really good starting point to then understand what does that next bit look like, and that's the ideal point to start feeding that type of information in. And likewise, you know, all the information we've been sent, various reports, and pass them on to DEFRA. All of that will be considered as part of that research. There's potential, perhaps, opportunities for, you know, a review of evidence, a literature review type thing. So anything's on the table to a certain extent. Most likely centred around rural land use and how that's managed. But certainly, if you're going, that's the forum to feed that. Or by all means, I'm happy to feed it from anyone's behalf.
Okay, so I'm going to draw a halt now because we need to get a decision now over the line, and we've still got a bit of agenda to get through. So the proposal is that the nutrient management plan forms in some way part of the catchment management plan as a detachable document, which will still be overseen in terms of delivery of actions by the nutrient management board. Are we in agreement? Okay, thank you. So, sorry, people online, I'm going to move on now. Thanks, Councillor Charlton. Okay, so probably if we can work in, you know, in now in the gap between meetings about how exactly that's going to translate in terms of the task and finish group and the sorts of things that have been raised today about what the scope of the plan will be, what the expectations are, and so forth, so that can communicate through to the commissioned authors. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, can I just ask, can you please make sure the agricultural sector are clearly represented on those groups, please?
Yeah, they will be.
Alyssa, would it be a good idea at this point just to highlight that perhaps we need a small group from the Nutrient Management Board to actually decide what sort of things they're going to feed into the Wye Catchment Partnership?
Okay, so what I would suggest, I think it's a great idea. But whoever's going to be on the task and finish for the catchment partnership working group looking at this, that they need to then kind of refer out to the board in order to properly take on board anything that anyone wants to say, whether that's in the form of a physical meeting or a virtual meeting or whatever, so that the board is represented by that person on the task and finish. If that makes sense, does that meet with everyone's broadly agreement?
And Herefordshire Council need to be represented because they're the ones that require the nutrient management plan to prepare their local plan.
Yeah.
It has to be a plan. The nutrient management plan has to be a plan for growth. It can't just be.
Okay, but the peopling of the working group is still undetermined, isn't it? So yeah. That's it. So as long as that's all taken into account, and the working group reflects that and reflects the point that Helen's made about making sure that the agricultural sector is also represented, then that should all be fine, I think. Yeah? Okay, good.
A follow-up to the board's decision on my question, because it relates to something that has been said in discussion of this item. The board this afternoon agreed to adopt the target of 18% by 2030 against the 2018 baseline. It follows from that, picking up Liz's point, that the board should receive reports at an interval that you should determine, I'm going to propose annually, of progress against the 18% by 2030 from the 2018 baseline. If you don't do that, why on earth did 2 hours ago you make the decision to adopt the target?
Yeah, but that would be logically, that will then form part of the plan, and that would be the plan, one of the actions in the plan against which we would be looking for monitoring.
Indeed, but
rather than a sort of standalone item. So, and we have, I think, already agreed and discussed that that trajectory will be part of the plan, and therefore, as part of the regular monitoring of the plan, that it would make sense. But I think we've captured the idea. Thanks, James. Okay, great. Going to go very quickly now. Updates from the officers' groups. Thank you both. So the EA, NE, NRW. Thank you all for the update. And particularly, I spent a bit of time looking at the 2025 growing season report, which was, I thought, really interesting. And there were some odd kind of questions that came up about the differences between 2022 and 2025 in terms of algal bloom. I'm trying to understand that. But it was good, and also really lovely pictures of the ranunculus in the river, which I think was was really a good thing to see. So has anyone got any comments on the updates from the Statutory Officer Group? Mary?
Just one thing before, we'd asked that people who had attended the SOG meeting, we had their names so we knew who'd been there, which isn't on there. But I think it mentions an update from the January meeting to be given today. I don't know if they want to do that before we have other questions.
Yeah, so that was for me. I think I've said some of it actually during the course of the agenda. So when the SOG met on the back of the last meeting in October and the request for us to think about the purpose of the SOG, why were we there, what do we want to do, there were a couple of things that we wanted to feed back to the board. So the SOG discussed what its purpose is, and it's absolutely about the restoration of the Wye Catchment. That's the whole point of meeting. We talked about who we reported to, if you like, and there's a number of different forums that the SOG interacts with. So it's the Nutrient Management Board, but also the Wye Catchment Partnership, and some of the members also report into other environmental boards. I think I mentioned earlier that we did have a discussion about, can we make decisions at the SOG? What's the best way to spend our time together in terms of contributing to that purpose, which is about the restoration of the catchment. We can make decisions on behalf of our organisations, but the SOG's not a decision-making body. So actually, the discussions today have been really helpful because they've come to the same conclusion that the SOG did, which is it can't hold a catchment management plan because it can't deliver the whole thing, but it can contribute. I think the result of the discussions was an appetite to refresh the SOG terms of reference and also have a conversation with both the Nutrient Management Board and the Wye Catchment Partnership about how the SOG can respond to requests from those boards and what the relationship's going to be, and use the update of the terms of reference to probably help all of us define that a little bit more. So it was a really good discussion, and it was a good platform for actually the discussion we've had today, which is we're going to have a new plan. There'll be targets in that plan. There'll be reporting requirements. When we understand those more, the SOG is ready to sort of set ourselves up to be able to work alongside it. But I think one of the outcomes was not entirely own it, which is actually what the outcome's been of this discussion as well. So I think that was the summary of the discussion we had. I think the other thing that we talked about was the SOG or agencies provide a slide each or a few slides each for this board in order to provide the feedback. I think that's been in the absence of any full clarity about what's most helpful for this board. So I think the SOG would welcome anything specific or any direction saying, actually, do you know what, this is what would be most helpful for us, and then the SOG can discuss it and provide the best possible thing for the board. So that was the outcome of the discussion at SOG. So a real appetite for working closely together, doing the right stuff, spending our time wisely, but all to support the restoration of the catchment.
Mary and then Pat.
I'll just go through the slides that we've got then, if that's okay. Thank you for the update, Gemma. Yeah, the 2025 monitoring summary report is really interesting, and I think there's things in there that are new and different, and I think that's important. So I know I've pushed on it before, but the fact that the Mortimer's Cross testing point was dropped for 1 year for health and safety reasons does give me a problem with my rolling 3-year average. So I've got several years of, I've got a significant pass for the top part, and then we get the next testing point, which is nearly a pass. If I'd had that 2024, I've got a fighting chance of pushing you guys to say that I should not be in the position that when I say I'm meaning other house delivery partners, that we're in. So I would beseech you that that doesn't happen again, because one missed gap means a rolling average doesn't work. But otherwise, that report's really interesting, and although it's kind of on the edge of my scientific kind of capability to understand it, I could see that there were useful things in there. It would be more helpful if we had more testing points, is the other obvious thing on that report, that we just go down that straight channel where we know that the problems are probably coming in from the sides. So I think we need to ask your £1 million research pot to look at funding testing points, lug, arrow through, to be able to give you any kind of good scope of pushing for work you need to be doing in those areas. The refocus part 3 was also very interesting. If I had to boil it down to one nugget, it says that its recommendations in phase 1 still stand. So we all know that legacy phosphorus is a problem, and it'll continue to be a problem because it's within the depth of the soil that nobody really expected it to be. We know it's there. So I would say that the recommendations that have been raised at every meeting 2023 onwards from Refocus Part 1, the Wye Catchment Partnership, the Nutrient Management Board, the SOG would be mad not to look at them. And I think that would be one of my asks, is that we revisit recommendations that we discarded previously and then moved on from. Paul's pretty clear that he still thinks they've got legs and they would help. But it's a very good report, and I think we need to thank the Refocus team for their commitment to an area they do not live or work in, and yet they still remain fascinated by. I think that's pretty impressive. I have to be here because I committed to do it so that my kids didn't have a poison river. Paul and Shane and everybody else, they don't need to do this, and they are. I know they're getting paid, but I try not to let that idea of people getting paid to do things is, again, something I try not to worry about. On the council's update, I might just speak to Gemma afterwards about, there's a few things in that I know people are going to ask me, Gemma, so I'll probably just come back. It's probably not of any interest to anybody else. On the Natural England slide, it's not going to be a surprise when I ask. Farmer Collaboration Fund, £30 million investment in partnerships to deliver environmental action and business growth. That's a national fund, isn't it? Yes. So it needs to say, Claire, in the Natural England slide for the why, it needs to say we are pitching for hopefully XYZ from this £30 million fund. Otherwise, people reading that are going to go, geez, we've got £30 million from Natural England. That's incredible. I could tell you how to spend that. And when it says things like to deliver environmental action and business growth, we must always be mindful that we don't apply that to any other sector. So house building does not get the advantage of having a £30 million investment group to deliver our environmental wishes that we might like to do or support business growth. So again, if any of that money comes to the catchment, we need to say what it is, what it was spent on, and what reductions of phosphorus or ammonia or nitrate or whatever come from that spend, because that's public money, and I think it's important that we have a chart showing what it reduced by. But all of those things are national things. Natural England need to be very clear they're not Wye specific. I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, just letting everyone know we are now running over. Pat and then Simon.
Thanks, Chair. So to support something that Liz said earlier and that Mary's touched on as well, it feels looking at these reports, there's some valuable information in here, but we tend here towards measurement of activity rather than measurement of outcomes. Now, I can only assume that the teams in all of these organisations have got targets. They've got personal targets, they've got team targets, and they've got legal targets. What I would love to see is that where those targets are pertinent to this body, that they are articulated, updated whenever they are updated, or indeed if we anticipate an update, we're given insight into that. And then each time we have this meeting, we see how we are progressing against those targets.
I've been minded, it's something that's going through WAF at the moment, Wye and Us Foundation at the moment, is we're trying to put numbers on everything. Once you've got a number on something, you can then take bite-sized chunks of it. The only data that I know of that's given the amount of phosphorus that's moving down a particular catchment was the hack sond that we had in at Disseth for a while that showed 950 kilos of phosphate, 7.9 tonnes of other forms of phosphorus were coming down the Ithon system on an annual basis. The ratio was about 1/9 of the phosphorus coming out of the lug system is coming in the form of phosphate. The other is coming, mostly animal manure forms, organic forms is the other form. Which is why when I see the report from on Wales, which is confusing phosphorus all the way through with phosphate, which is the monitor parameter, it questions me. But I do, in terms of the statutory officers group, really value the reports that come out. It's the reason they're like lodestones that we can key work around, and that's the role of the statutory officers. And I thank you very much for it. And I see this plan at the same time as a lodestone. You might question it, but it's still a lodestone that we can work around as a deliverer. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Councillor Charlton?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gemma, for your feedback, because actually that was really useful for me. I'm really pleased that you've been looking at what the purpose of the SOG is as well. I mean, I think we should come back to this on a fairly regular basis just to make sure that we're still in the same place. But I just said to let you know that Powys hasn't been able to interact and contribute too much to the SOG in the last 12 months or so. Some of you will know the reason why is that the officer that we had, who was a highly valued officer, no longer works for Powys. He has gone off for illness, and I am pleased to say that he is doing quite well now. But he won't be coming back to Powys. We've had Jed Knight on here for the last couple of meetings, and he introduced himself earlier. Jed has been working with the Marches Environmental Investment Platform, and I think he also works on the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme. And those are the two things that I would quite like to see coming through the SOG at some time over for the next board, maybe, because I think there's some value in bringing that through to the SOG. And you will have a new officer, Dan Burgess. I think some of you may already know him, but he will be replacing Peter on the SOG. So hopefully we should be getting some more information coming through from Powys as well. So I thought it'd be useful for me to give you that update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Okay, good. We've got wider updates from members of the board. None have been submitted. Simon?
Sorry. Do you want an update?
Well, do you know what? Rather than doing a rushed update now,
right. But basically, can I refer you to a press release that was circulated by Monmouthshire Council?
Yeah, by all means, and I think sort of if we can just do a running total, even if stuff appears between board meetings, if you get it to me and then I can get it to Ben, and we can kind of fashion something that approximates an update, because WAF is by far and away probably the most important delivery partner.
My New Year's resolution is to feed more information.
Please do.
The board. That'd
be lovely. Thank you. Okay, so that leaves only the date of the next meeting. That's proposed to be the 22nd of April at 2 p.m. So thank you all for your attendance. Thank you to the statutory officers and to guests. Please can we halt the live stream?